The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
Hey, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show. Thanks for tuning in to the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM. If you're interested in sponsoring my show, you can send me an email to the MikeWagnerShow@gmail.com, or you could also donate to the podcast. Just go to the Donate Listen site, and you can also donate whatever you like. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. For those who are interested, Anchor can give you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. We got creation tools, allows you to record and edit podcasts so it sounds great, and they'll distribute the podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. Spotify, Apple, Google, many more. And you can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. So download the Anchor app for free or go to Anchor FM to get started.
It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all you need. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, and over 35 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author James Wallace Birch. He's out of Northern Virginia, and he's got a new book called If You Find Emory, Walden, and he also wrote beforehand Discontent, Disappearance of a Young Radical. He's been writing books for quite some time and has an amazing story to tell as well, too. And, of course, you know, he wrote about his high school friend, Emory Walden. We'll talk more about that. And, of course, you know, he's just a big influence on many things and how he got started. And live, ladies and gentlemen, from Northern Virginia, the very, very talented James Wallace Birch. James, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really thrilled to be here. Really thrilled to talk to you. Fan of the show, so it means a lot to me.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to having you as well, too. And you wrote a book called If You Find Emory, Walden, and you also had a previous one called Discontent, Disappearance of a Young Radical. And we'll talk about those two books, especially your new one. But first, tell us how you got started in writing.
Yeah, so I mean, as a kid, I think we're always thinking about what we enjoy and, what our talents are. And some people, it's baseball or whatever it is. I always kind of liked stories. And, as I got going through school, I had these really long bus rides. A lot of listeners probably can relate to that, or real long walks to school, that kind of thing. And I would just sit there and try to keep myself occupied. This is before obviously smartphones and all these things. So just sitting there staring out the window, and I'd start thinking of after story after story. And of course, I didn't bother writing them down at that time. It's just something you're doing to pass the time. And so as I got older, got into college, and I'd take a lot of writing classes and do that kind of thing that probably a lot of other writers did. It was just kind of creative writing classes and writing papers and that sort of thing. And my friends would always say, "Hey, you're pretty good at this." Well, one day in college, this kid whose name I mentioned comes to me and he says, "Hey, you're a pretty good writer. Why don't you do me a favor?" And I got this college paper that I got to write, and it's due tomorrow, and it was for a final or something, and I don't want to write it. I'll pay you some money to do it. And I thought to myself, somebody wants to pay me money to write something, So I was kind of like, whoa. So I looked at it and I said, no, I'm not doing this. It's not something I could help you out with, even if I wanted to. I didn't know anything about the topic, but just the idea of someone, hey, you have a skill, you have a talent at this, and it's worth something. You know what I mean? Kind of, it's worth some money, so to speak. And so that got me thinking about sort of the process of trying to take something that was a hobby to me and say, okay, how can I, start to kind of put words on paper and find ways to do that, as a hobby and as a way to maybe make a little bit of money and that kind of thing. And so I guess it's, I would say that's sort of how I got started, is other people coming to me and sort of taking interest in what I was doing.
That is fantastic. And what's that one moment that influenced you into writing Once for All? What was that aha moment that said, this is what I'm going to exactly do for the rest of my career?
Oh, maybe it was that moment. I don't know. I think it's one of those things. It's like the ocean. You watch it long enough, and you kind of lose sight of the waves and kind of how things are going. It's sort of there, and so you sort of wake up one day, and that's what you're doing. And so I wouldn't say that there was really a moment. Maybe that was that moment, but it was just kind of that process of growing and finding what I love to do and love to talk about and tell stories and that kind of thing. And I think if anything, you put your mind to something and you get really into it and you work hard at it, eventually you can you sort of wake up one day and you go, oh man, look at these things that are happening for me, and it's really rewarding.
Mm-hmm. And who are some of your favorite writers and authors growing up?
Oh, so many. Kind of all over the place. I was really into the 20th century kind of stuff. That, when the stuff that they make you read in school, and I know I didn't like all of it by any means, but when you're, some of those stories they make you read, some of them are kind of cliche, but things like J.D. Salinger, A Catcher in the Rye, really had a big impact on me. Kind of to see somebody, sort of a story about somebody who was kind of a punk and kind of a misfit and kind of, sort of not happy with the status quo of things and kind of wants to rebel with it. That's how I felt in a lot of ways. So definitely J.D. Salinger. I was a big fan of Hubert Selby Jr. He wrote a book that was made into a pretty famous movie a while ago. It was Requiem for a Dream. And so he was pretty out there in terms of stuff he was writing about, real kind of controversial stuff and, bad guys and bad characters and misfits and that sort of a thing. And then I would say I was a big fan of F. Scott Fitzgerald. I always kind of wished I could write as poetically as he could, and I always thought that his stories were also kind of about, outsiders and misfits. I mean, a lot of people know The Great Gatsby and the movies that have been made about it and read the book, and kind of this idea of this wealthy person, this really wealthy Gatsby character, but, in a sense, he was kind of an imposter, and he was trying to sort of fit in, and he felt like an outsider. So I think that's kind of the thread. I always liked people that were writing about sort of outsiders and people that couldn't quite fit into the mainstream of society and what society expected of them.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of your other favorite books that you enjoyed?
Well, I would say that Hubert Selby Jr. has a really good book called Last Exit to Brooklyn. in school, I liked The Invisible Man. It was kind of a bunch of short stories by Ray Bradbury. Huge fan of basically everything that F. Scott Fitzgerald did. This Side of Paradise was probably one that really got me wanting to write stories about a young guy that kind of was, again, kind of trying to fit in. In this case, he's going off to Princeton. And then probably my favorite book, which I failed to mention, is a book actually by George Orwell, which everybody knows George Orwell for the 1984, the Animal Farm thing. But he wrote this book called Coming Up for Air when he was a lot younger, and it was really more about just this in this case, just this guy, and he kind of wins some money. I can't remember, gambling or something. He comes into a little bit of money. He kind of decides to sort of escape for a little while from his responsibilities with his family and things, and kind of goes off exploring his life and kind of gets into trouble. It's really interesting.
It's amazing you mentioned George Orwell as well, too. And I remember reading Animal Farm a while back. What were your thoughts on Animal Farm?
Yeah, I read it in high school, and I can't say I truly understood it at the time, and obviously they taught it and kind of, talked about it as a, sort of a tale of caution about sort of totalitarian states and things like that. And I thought it was sort of really interesting the way that George Orwell kind of created this whole world on this farm, and then was able to make this bigger story about life and about the world, and and like using these characters, and as so maybe silly as it is, pigs and the cows and whatnot, kind of talk about who we are as humans and kind of how we are sort of the same thing. And that definitely was a huge influence to me.
And what are your thoughts on the movie adaptation as well, too, of Animal Farm?
No, I don't know if I honestly don't know if I've seen it.
Okay, I thought you might have for some reason too, but we'll talk about your latest book as well too. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and over 35 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author James Wallace Birch of If You Find Emory, Walden. That's courtesy of Beacon Publishing here on the Mike Wagner Show. And you also had a book called Discontent, Disappearance of a Young Radical. And let's talk about your new book, If You Find Emory, Walden, and tell us more about the book.
Yeah, sure. So this is a psychological mystery. So it's about a young guy. He's kind of getting towards middle life, and kind of looking back on his life, and he's sort of wondering how he got to where he is. So he kind of wakes up one day, and one of his he's a teacher, and one of his former classmates shows up with this book, and she says, "Oh, there's something in here for you." Long story short, he realizes that this book is a clue that sets him off on a search, a hunt for his missing friend. So the idea is he and this young student kind of go out on the road, and they're living in their van, and they're kind of searching for this missing clue that they think is going to lead them to this friend. But on top of that, there's also a promise of $3 million that the friend has left behind. So when the friend disappeared, he had kind of written out his story of what had happened to him, and he left this money. And he had gone to the main character of the story and sort of asked him to publish, his story, and said, "Here's all this money." But sort of the catch is that the main character never actually went and found the money. So now years later, when the clue shows up about the friend who's missing, it's kind of a hunt to try to find that money and then also try to find the friend. And so it's really sort of this this adventure through the United States, mostly on the East Coast, but then, kind of going out west as well, to try to hunt down this missing person.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the big question is, why is he reaching out to trying to find Emory?
Exactly, and so that's sort of at the center of the mystery. And so it becomes this kind of question of his diving into his past. So he's looking back at his life in this lens of sort of what have I, what are the choices that I've made, and how much have I had control over my life, and how much have I sort of just let people like, Emory in this case, come and influence me. And so it's also sort of a walk down sort of the nostalgia of people, it's kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, sort of that time period, and he's sort of visiting back to it and trying to figure out, unwind this mystery and the different clues that are being sent out to him.
Mm-hmm. And of course, his obsession with Emory's disappearance destroyed his personal life, and how in a few ways destroyed his personal life?
So that's a really great question. So he publishes this memoir, and so this is where it gets really kind of fascinating. So you mentioned the first book, which is the Discontents book. Now, that book is the memoir that he published, so it might kind of seem a little confusing. So the idea is, in this novel, he's actually making sort of a reference back to this first book. Now, people don't need to read the first book to get this novel. It completely stands by itself, but it's kind of a story within a story. So it kind of creates this whole larger world. So the question, how does it destroy his life, is as the story goes along, we see that by publishing that book, he kind of put his whole relationship with these narrating business relationships sort of on the line to kind of stand up for his friend and try to advocate for his missing friend and sort of be his ally, because his friend has sort of become this bad person in the view of the public. So his life is unwinding through sort of the entire book. So I don't want to give too much away to the readers, but you kind of see his life start to kind of come apart, and then at the same time you kind of see him trying to put together in his mind what has happened. So it's the kind of story where you can't always trust what you're reading. You can't always, without giving too much away, you kind of can't always trust where the story is going and sort of how his memory is playing out.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the big question is, who is Emory Walden?
So Emory Walden is the character from the first book. So both of the books are written from the point of view of different characters. And so Emory Walden is the main character from the Discontents novel. Again, people don't need to read the first one to read the new one at all. But he's a character from the first one. So he's this young, kind of self-assured, really sort of idealistic guy. He's overly confident. He's narrow in the way he sees the world. He thinks that kind of everything he believes is the way the world is. And so in the first book, we see sort of how his life falls apart. And so he's your sort of typical overly confident, outspoken, loud person who basically goes through his life not really caring what anybody else thinks and what anyone else sort of thinks of him. And his overconfidence is sort of doing without giving too much away.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, we'll talk more about the first book, Discontents, Disappearance of a Young Radical, in just a minute. But first, listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look on a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on themikewagnershow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and over 35 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author James Wallace Birch from Beacon Publishing. Talked about his new book, If You Find Emory Walden. And going back to his first one, Discontent, Disappearance of a Young Radical, talks about the disappearance of James' old high school friend, Emory Walden. And, of course, a little bit more about Emory Walden, political agitator, notorious graffiti artist, became a counterculture icon, and haunted by the U.S. government. And you can maybe go a little more detail. And you say Emory Walden is like the main character or one of the main characters, and who is actually the main character?
Okay, so in the brand new book, Emory Walden, the main character is a fictional version of me. So it's a sort of a fictional version that goes out looking for his lost friend, which, as you mentioned, Emory Walden, kind of this graffiti artist, this political agitator, this really confident guy. Because in the first book, it's sort of set up in a way that me, as the author, I kind of wrote it as though I didn't write the book. I wrote it as though Emory Walden was telling his story, so it's written from his point of view. But a fictional version of me, of James, is in the first book, kind of saying, hey, I published this book for my missing friend. So that's why it's called The Disappearance of a Young Radical, because this is his former friend, and he is publishing his memoir, sort of fictional memoir that, sort of, it's his story. So the main character in the new book is a fictional James. He's kind of a midlife point of his life. It's midlife. His marriage is falling apart. His life is kind of falling apart. His career is falling apart. He's drinking too much. He's kind of at a point where he's sort of lost the purpose of kind of what he should be doing, and then this mystery falls into his lap, and he kind of finds his purpose through that. So while the character in the first book is really self-confident, as you mentioned, he's this kind of political guy. He's overly, he's kind of like radical. He's doing the graffiti. He's getting into trouble. The character in the new book is the opposite of that. He's kind of defeated. He's down. He's more quiet, more introverted, more passive. And so he's swept up into this whole thing, and it's kind of this whole river that's going forward, and he's getting pulled into it, and then you reveal out kind of what his experience is and whether or not you should really trust the story that he's telling.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, talking about trusting stories and everything else, you also have Melanie in your new book, If You Find Emory Walden. And tell us a little bit about Melanie, and then how does she join in on the journey?
Okay, yeah. So Melanie is a former student of James. So James is a college professor, kind of teaches college classes on the side, and she is this really smart young woman that was a student of his, and so she's sort of obsessed with the disappearance of Emory Walden, and she kind of shows up at his door because she gets a package in the mail, and the package in the mail is the clue that sets them both out on this adventure. So the package in the mail is this clue that went to her address, and she's wondering, why did they show up at my apartment? And they happen to live in the same building as James, and she happens to live in the same building as James, so she comes up and says, sort of, I got your mail by accident. He opens the mail and finds the clue, and then the circumstances happens that leads them both on this adventure. And so you're kind of left wondering, what is her role in all of this? How did she get caught up in this? Why did this package show up at her house and not James's house? And also, why does she care so much to find this missing person who she's never met, who she's only, sort of learned about and heard about? Or how much interest does she have in this missing money? Because she knows that there's also money that's missing. And so they kind of going along together set out on this adventure, but they don't necessarily trust each other.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, you also find the book as well, too. If You Find Emory Walden and Discontent's Disappearance of a Young Radical, where can we find your books?
Yeah, so If You Find Emory Walden is available just about anywhere you buy books. So BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com, Power Books, IndieBound, available in paperback. It's available on Kindle on the Amazon store. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, so people who have Kindle Unlimited can download it for free as part of their Kindle Unlimited subscription. The copy of Discontent is only available through Amazon. It's available in paperback. It's also available on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited.
That's fantastic. And once again, James Wallace Birch, author of If You Find Emory, Walden, also Discontent's Disappearance of a Young Radical, published by Beacon Books here on the Mike Wagner Show. Just a few minutes here, James. I'd love to have you back on. You've been fantastic. Look forward to having you again soon. What are your upcoming plans for 2020 and beyond? What can we expect from you?
Oh, man, I don't know how you've been handling this pandemic thing, but it's really been something else, right? So it's really kind of put me at a point where you have to kind of think, what is 2020 going to look like? Are we going to be, living in our homes in quarantine for the rest of the year? Or are we going to be, hopefully things going to be opening up? So I feel like a lot of people, I'm kind of in reactionary mode to kind of see how things go. So I got a couple of ideas and projects in the work. I really want to write a book that kind of goes back into life, sort of growing up in the time that I grew up in Northern Virginia, sort of in the 90s and early 2000s, and kind of more of a coming of age story, more of kind of looking at some of the times that happened there. If any of your listeners are located in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area, it's a really crazy and interesting place to live. A lot of people come to Northern Virginia to try to live out their dream or try to get their power, try to get their sense of of significance or that kind of thing. And as we think about, that kind of world, there's so many stories that you can tell in that, because so many people come for their dreams, but their dreams don't necessarily come true. So, you've probably seen a million movies about Los Angeles. You probably, books, these types of things, that people go out there to be famous and make $1 million and as a director or actor or whatever, singer. There's not a lot of stories that tell that same storyline of Washington, D.C., but it's the same kind of environment. People flock there because there's power and there's money. And so there's a lot of opportunities, stories there. So that's kind of one project. And then, just kind of thinking about how, podcasting and some of these other things that we can do now that we're in the stay-at-home world and kind of having to stay far away from each other. And so I'm kind of trying to mull over some ideas there. It's a really interesting time to be alive.
Mm-hmm. It does sound like it as well, too. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. That is a tough question. The biggest influence. One thing we haven't talked about, it's been a huge, huge influence on my writing, actually, is music. I really grew up listening to a lot of these bands that were popular. Jimmy Eat World, Saves the Day, The Starting Line, the Get Up Kids, so many of these types of bands. And I think one thing I kind of failed to mention when you were asking me earlier on, like getting into writing, I have no musical talent. I couldn't play the drums. I couldn't play guitar. I tried. I was horrible at it. So since I couldn't do music, I figured, maybe I could write some songs. Well, none of my friends could play any instruments either. All right, well, then we got to start kind of getting into stories. So the biggest influence in my career, I would say, is the music that I listened to growing up. It really has shaped the way that I tell stories.
Mm-hmm. And that's fantastic as well, too. There's nothing wrong with that, story behind the song or song behind the story. You can look at it that way. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
The best advice I can give to anybody is you have to be willing to look at your life and drop everything that isn't essential to who you want to be, what your happiness is, and what your goals are in your life. And I think we live in a world where there's so much going on. We have so many responsibilities. There's so many things pulling us in so many different directions. And I think that there's a tendency for people to try to get more and more complex and try to add complexity and try to do more and try to be more. And I think that we would be better off if we sort of stepped back and said, okay, rather than adding more and more and more, let's strip some stuff back and focus on what it is that we think makes us really happy and that takes our skills, takes our passions, and helps them, to the world and help impact other people or help, create art for other people or, do good in the world, whatever it is that we want to do that we care about. Strip away all the other stuff and focus on what you really, valuable member of, whatever group or whatever society that you want to be a part of.
That is exactly a good point as well, too. And once again, author James Wallace Birch of If You Find Emory, Walden, published by Beacon Publishing here on the Mike Wagner Show. James, big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to hearing you again soon. Once again, tell us about your upcoming projects, what's your website, how do people contact you, where can people purchase your books?
Yeah, absolutely. So people can find me on Instagram at James Wallace Birch. That's Birch. They can find my website at jameswallacebirch.wordpress.com. They can find my books on Goodreads, the book social network. They can find all of my books, as I mentioned before, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, these types of places.
That is fantastic. Once again, James, a big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to hearing you again soon. Do us a favor, keep us up to date. Love to have you back on sometime in 2020 and beyond. You've been great.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much. I sure appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.